Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lead Volunteers podcast and Lead Ministry Live. My name is Josh Denhart. I am super grateful to be here today. We are talking about training. Y'all know you got to recruit, you got to train in order to effectively retain. So I'm excited about that today. I have a special guest with me today. Her name is Heather, and this is going to be fun today. I titled today, this is Heather Soukup, and
Hi, everybody.
hello. So I titled this interview, An Interview from Cloud Nine. And the reason that I did that is I got a very fun set of text messages from Heather. I believe it was last Friday, right? Is that when it was?
Thursday. Last
Thursday?
Thursday.
Last Thursday.
hmm
So I was just finishing a live speaking event. I was filling up my gas at a gas station, and I start getting all these fun, super excited blitz texts from Heather. And so, just as a little bit of context, Heather is part of the Lead Volunteers Master Course. So she is a member of Lead Volunteers. She's gone through some of the coursework, but she actually decided not just to have the kind of like done for you Lead Volunteers membership, she wanted the done with you. And so Heather joined the coaching program. And so she and I get on calls just like this on a very regular basis and kind of walk through the material of Lead Volunteers, but also walk through like what's going on in her individual world, right? So the coaching has
Yep.
been fun, Heather. And I remember you got a hold of me and said, hey, could we do a little extra coaching to kind of help prep me for the entire upcoming year? And so that's kind of where the background, I guess, or the backstory is that, yes, in fact, you and I have been working on something. And last Thursday was when you texted me from Cloud9. It said, texting you from Cloud9 because you had some great victories, and I'm super excited for us to talk about those today. Well, here's kind of what we do on the podcast. We do kind of a let's define it, let's develop it, and let's do it. And so, the thing we're talking about today from a define it kind of standpoint is training. Sometimes it can be a stressor. Heather, am I right?
Yeah, because you're working with these volunteers. Sometimes you have volunteers that have been working at your church for over 10 years. And so what else do they need to know?
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. So, in other words, it's like, hey, some of these volunteers, if I didn't even show up, they could possibly run the show, right?
Oh, definitely.
And,
Definitely.
and
And that's the kind of volunteer that you want. You want someone
right,
to be able to work while you're on vacation or,
you're exactly right.
if you get sick or whatever, or you move, the ministry needs to continue on without being handicapped because you're not there.
Exactly. Okay, so, but that leads to that question, right? Like, oh my word, what would I even talk about? What kind of content would even be of value to these people who are, mature Christians? They've been walking with the Lord for a while. They've been volunteering before you even got there. Like, what do I even have to say to them, right? And I
I
would say,
think,
yeah, go ahead.
in that situation, for what I have done is just recognize that, first of all, that I'm just there to kind of call out and facilitate what they already know and remind them. Like the Apostle Paul says, it doesn't pay me to write this to you again because you already know it.
Yes,
But
but
you
I'm
need to
writing to you.
remember and keep doing it.
He says, I'm writing to you not because you don't know these things, but because you do know them, and I want to stir you up by way of reminder. I mean, that's a good word. By the way, quick shout out to Heather. She really is not only a woman of God and she's a leader in the church, she actually knows the scriptures, right? So if there's nothing else you take away, like be a man or be a woman who knows the word. And so that's been something I've been so impressed with you is that you do have a depth of understanding and you have this ability to connect scripture to whatever we're talking about. So I'm very, very, very impressed with that. Well, listen, here's the deal. We're talking about an interview from Cloud9. And the funny thing is that when it comes to training, often it becomes the bottom of our list And Heather, you had said that it had become, in a sense, the bottom of your list because you were kind of like, I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'll just kind of kick the can forward, right? And we don't want to do that. So again, I had this wonderful call from Heather, kind of like this text stream from Cloud9, and I gotta say, big shout out, big set of fireworks, woohoo, for Heather,
I love
because
fireworks.
yes, because you actually uh, you're tops and you did a fantastic job. Well, let's jump in to talk about this. Now, we talked about the stressor, that it can easily become the bottom of our bucket, the bottom of our list. We don't want to do it. But for you, you found great success. So kind of talk to us about just some of the things that beyond the stressor. You had a fantastic win. Kind of talk to us about that.
Well, the main thing that I wanted to share today was that, like Josh has been saying, I knew I needed to do a big year launch, fall
Yes.
kickoff type training.
Yes.
And every year, August would come, and I would be like, oh, when am I going to do that? And so when the pandemic was a blessing for me in that everything shut down, and then I could gradually start over, build
Yes.
things back up. And so about a year ago, we reopened our ministry slowly. We started with early childhood, then elementary, then preteen. Meanwhile, Wednesday night got plugged in there somewhere. And now we're still working on relaunching like our second hour ministries and moving back more towards normal. And we're hoping with this second wave that all the policies and procedures that we put in place last year will carry us through and we'll be able to sustain our ministry. And because of all of that, then I had bandwidth this summer to look forward for the coming year. So I met with my team, we brainstormed some ideas, then I met with Josh and kind of fleshed out some of those, um, just kind of the building blocks behind building out your whole year. And
I mean, because in
one
a
of the
sense,
things,
wouldn't that be awesome for everyone if we could walk into a year knowing exactly where our training of our volunteers would go? I mean, everybody knows we need to do training, but it's like, eh, what am I going to do? And so for you, together, we now have an entire year, in a sense, mapped out. We'll get to that. Keep going.
yeah. So, our role as pastor or director of children is not to drive the bus.
Right.
A lot of times we think we're the bus driver. And sometimes we think we're the socializer that needs to be in the back of the bus talking with everybody. But our actual role is to be the GPS. We're the leader that has to tell where all the buses are going,
That's right.
whether it's the midweek program bus or the
Yes.
Sunday
It,
bus.
and
And
the funny thing is, the larger your ministry gets, the more you need to be the GPS and not the everything. Am I right?
right, right,
And
right. Because unless you want to burn out,
right, which is exactly what none of us, and I mean none of us, want to have happen, right? So,
right?
so
No one wakes up in the morning saying, "Oh, I hope I burn out today."
right, right. But Heather, what I want to take my hat off again to you is that during COVID and things were kind of shut down, you said, hey, could this provide a unique opportunity to literally restart and reset everything and take a fresh look at everything? And so,
Mhm.
you started Lead Volunteers during the pandemic. You said, okay, I'm going to
Mhm.
start fresh. And we did some pretty intense coaching. And I've just been impressed that you have been a person who has, it's like, hey, tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it. And so that's been huge. Now, speaking of that, let's talk about this process and the process that you went through to bring about a successful kind of training night that's going to lead to a training year. That's the key, right?
Yeah. So first thing is I determined I was going to have a training.
Yes.
And then I got with my early childhood director and we picked a date. And then we started working backwards of, okay, well, we need to promote it, 2 weeks. We need to do this. One week, we need to do this. Day of, we need to do this. And we just made a huge list of all of the before, during, and after things that,
Yes.
before the event was a huge long list. It was every day for about 2 weeks. And then the day of the event was pretty seamless. The worst thing I had to do was put chicken in the oven, which that
Right.
took 5 minutes, and then the after part of the event, I still have a couple things that I need to do because I'm slow with technology. So I've got a couple of follow up things that I still need to do
But
and
you
some
know,
notes to write. But
the nice thing is that you and I together, we kind of mapped out, right? We mapped out, hey, before the event, like crank out these things because often people are just like, well, what am I supposed to do? I guess I'm just going to send an invite and I'm going to get up in front of people and start manically talking and they're going to listen and it's going to go less well and people aren't going to ever want to come back because nobody wants to come to another evening meeting. They just don't want to. Um,
yeah.
now,
So, the model that we learn in lead
yes,
volunteers is personal, pray, prepare, and plan. And those four building blocks really help create like an inclusive, holistic, participatory type meeting so that
right.
it's all the responsibility is back on those very great volunteers that you already have.
Yes,
And then they're getting ownership.
absolutely. Interestingly enough, let me just talk through those very briefly for those who have not been a part of one of the Lead Volunteers trainings. Maybe they aren't a part of the Lead Volunteers Master Course. So, personal, they all start with P, 4 big chunks to your meeting: personal, pray, prepare, and plan. Now, uh, uh, pray, of course, pretty simple, right? But I can't tell you, Heather, how many people or how many meetings I've been a part of where we just jump into the material and we may have kind of a God, please bless our meal and bless our meeting or bless my meeting, right? But the pray time can actually be a deep and engaging aspect. And it should be, right? I mean, call on the name of
We
the
just
Lord.
did a little mini concert of prayer, praying for the students, praying for the parents, praying for like the ministry here in general, praying for each other as volunteers. It was fantastic.
And I think that that's an important thing. This is not a mother bird standing in front, just quickly praying for everything. It's like you were not the one exclusively, quote, in control. You were
Right.
releasing the meeting so that everyone was a participant. You had a concert of prayer. That's huge. Now, the personal one is always a fun one for me um, because I think it's super important for us to be playful, to be fun
Yes.
with people. And so you had an aspect of your meeting that you literally set aside a short amount of time to be a little playful. What did you guys do?
Well, um, not to keep promoting the Lead Volunteers course, but it has really been so helpful. So I'm just going to keep doing that.
Sure, sure.
So, at the risk of being annoying, the Lead Volunteers course, part of it, during the retain section, there are some icebreakers that Josh has put together. So, I picked one. The one I picked was, what's the correct way to eat an Oreo? And we all talked about it and laughed. And,
So
there's some people that wanted to lick it, and some people that just like want to scrape all the cream off, and
some
other
people just want to
people
eat it
are
like
like,
a
I don't even
cookie.
eat Oreos.
Right. Okay, so push pause for a minute. You had a small concert of prayer, and then you had a very basic and innocuous set of questions. This one happened just to be
I
one
actually
question.
did the Oreo first. I did the
Oh, you did
Oreo
the
first
okay,
to kind of like
yes, to get everybody
relax people
moving,
so
to
that
kind
they
of
would be willing
a
to
true icebreaker,
pray
right?
in a group.
Break the
Mhm.
ice, melt things socially. Um, but how funny is it, right? That it's something as silly, seemingly as silly as how do you eat an Oreo cookie? Well, guess what? There's probably 6 or 7 different. So my point is that you had some social time that really kind of
Mhm.
brought things together. But then, okay, so you did personal. You guys had a time of
Mhm.
prayer, a little mini concert of prayer that everyone was
Mhm.
engaged in. Am I right?
Mhm.
And then you had prepare. Now, I want to talk briefly about prepare and plan, two different things.
Mhm.
Prepare is really the Q2, the quadrant two from, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, right? Important and urgent.
Mhm.
This is super important, but it's not urgent at all. It's
Mhm.
really training your
Mhm.
people to be exceptional at what they do. And so we'll talk about what you did for that. But plan is really just quick, fast calendar items. And the funny thing is that often so many leaders gather everyone together as an all hands on deck meeting, and you're literally telling people like your calendar agenda items and stuff that could have been taken care of through an email, right? So many meetings are like that. We need all four components, but we don't want to be
Mhm.
imbalanced, right? Uh,
Right.
Now, Heather, I want to one of the main things that I think was super, super, super powerful is how you conducted your prepare, or that kind of like deeper staff training, so to speak. Can you speak to that a little
Mhm.
bit? How did you go about that?
Yes. Well, you know, we have to really consider the way adults learn, right? Because we're working with adults when we're working with our volunteers,
That's
and
right.
it's a different way of teaching. Because, like I said before, we have these very well equipped, highly trained, very wise leaders. There was a lady there who had been in children's ministry for 30 years or
Oh my
more.
word.
And so recognizing that she could probably talk about the heart of a leader, which is our theme for the year,
Sure.
I gave everyone a piece of paper, and actually one piece of paper per table, and just had them talk about what are qualities of a good leader. And then we picked on different people to share from their discussion group, and we had a lot of great things that came out of that. One of them was encouraging and kind, um,
So let me
resilient,
push
listening.
let me push pause here. Interestingly enough, instead of being intimidated that you have an entire room full of 30 plus leaders, 34 leaders that came to your meeting, and instead of
Mhm.
being intimidated that, like, oh my word, these people could run the meeting, they've done this longer than I have, what could I even say to them? You actually turned that on its head and you said, hey, you tell me what you think a good leader is. Interestingly enough, they now have a sense of ownership and empowerment. They're looking at you and saying, wow, she actually thinks that I have something to contribute. And so then
Mhm.
they were, in a sense, they were kind of coming up with some of your staff training content on the fly.
Definitely. Yeah,
That's
because I
huge.
collected all those pieces of paper, and then we're gonna work through those over the next year as we have our, um, meetings every other month, and then we'll just tease out some of that content with some scripture verses
So
and move forward.
in a sense, because of the way that you did this, you actually have, in a sense, you have quite a bit of the content for your all the rest of the year meetings, because these wonderful, good, and godly leaders, they kind of gave you great content. So
Yeah.
we don't have to come up with all of the genius ideas and come up with something that's, I mean, what does Solomon say? Listen, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun. And these good people, they might be able to phrase it in a little bit of a different way. Interestingly enough, Heather, as we talked on the phone yesterday, actually, and and as we talked, I said, hey, how cool would it be to not seek to take credit in the coming year for these great nuggets, but say, hey, Connie
Right.
Simpson, you know, here's something that she shared, and I want to give credit to her and elaborate on that. I mean, that is going to bolster her. It's also going to
Yes.
cause other people to think in their minds, wow, maybe the next meeting she's going to use one of mine. And so it's going to cause
Right.
people to have a sense of
Ownership.
ownership, right? And they're sitting. Now, you said something that people were actually sitting, you said, a little bit more on the edge of their seat during your meeting, and not just kind of like in snooze mode. What was that like?
It was really funny to watch, and kinda cool too,
Yeah.
because certain personalities will come in and they'll be like, you just know they're like, "Okay, here we are. We're just gonna do another day of whatever here and blah,"
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then as they're, like, participating and, contributing, they're, like, getting
There's
they're just sitting up straighter and,
a
they're
little bit
just
more toward the
feeling
edge of
like
their seat.
they
Yeah.
have yeah. It's that nonverbal, sense of, "Oh, I'm important. I'm gonna, like, sit up more." So,
Well, interestingly
yeah.
enough, I imagine that and by the way, you're not the only one who's ever had these types of successes, Heather. So, people that I have kind of coached through how to have effective meetings that engage the crowd, they're like, oh
Mhm.
my word. I've never had a meeting quite like this before, because here's the deal: the people who are coming into your meetings are like, all right, just, I just have to
Let's get this
endure.
over with.
Let's get this over with. I have to endure this and listen to a leader drone on manically. It is not a meeting, it's really just a
A
monologue,
talking head.
a talking head. And that is not engaging for anyone. And
Right.
so you're tapping into their current goodness already, and you saw them, like, they were in it with you. Now, I haven't asked you this, but did you get any feedback from anybody in the meeting? Did they talk to you after and say that they appreciated it? What was any feedback that you got?
I think they were just the I didn't really get any direct feedback at the
Except
meeting.
for their
I think they were just
nonverbals.
like, "Oh, I didn't know." Like, because I handed out a calendar with kind of like, "Okay, we're gonna have a meeting here, 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 here," which is new,
Yep.
and so they were like, "Oh, I didn't know that we were gonna have these other meetings," and I'm
Yes.
like, "Well, we are." You
Well,
know?
the neat thing, though, the neat thing is the feedback, in a sense, was their nonverbal, sitting on the edge of their seat, sitting up straight, being a participant in a way that they, in a sense, hadn't ever before.
Right, and they weren't, like, ready to get out of there either. They were
Okay.
wanting to kinda linger and, like, is there something more? I just felt like I coulda kept them there for a couple more hours,
Okay.
honestly.
Interestingly enough, that is a okay, as leaders, we have to have a different set of lenses. We have to be looking for these nuanced things that are giving us feedback. Man, if people are rushing off like rats rushing off a sinking ship, that's an indication that our meeting stunk. Am I right?
Yeah.
They're like,
Yeah.
get me out of here. But they lingered long. They wanted more social. They they were participants. You had, in a sense, primed the pump, and the water was now running quite well.
Mhm,
I absolutely
mhm.
think it's fantastic. Okay, so when it comes to this training thing, how can people kind of seek to make this happen, right? I mean, there are some simple, very, very, very basic things that you did, one of which was simply food. Can I have an amen?
Yes. Food is so important, and I think sometimes churches put a huge emphasis on it, sometimes they don't, and I think COVID is trying to take that away,
Sure.
but it's one of the major components. If you look at scripture, food is everywhere. It either drives connection and intimacy, or it becomes a barrier for people.
Right.
So if you right there in Genesis, Adam and Eve
Barrier.
eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and boom, there's a big barrier there between them and God because of this food. But God again makes a sacrifice, prepares a lamb, and restores the connection.
Yes.
Later in Esther, we see that she advocates for her people to build connection through food with the king and her people.
That's right.
And um and
And
not
and
just once, but twice,
and not only
back
that,
to
Heather,
back.
as you're explaining this, another thing that comes to mind is the value that the first century church put on breaking bread together,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Okay, so you used food. Now, Tell me
Yes.
more about, I mean, it wasn't insane. I mean, you could either create it or you could cater it. Am I right?
Right, absolutely. I just didn't want I wanted to be able to do this several times throughout the year, so I didn't want to use all my food budget in one fell
Of
swoop by
course, of
catering it.
course.
And I had the bandwidth in order to do it, so I had someone do the shopping for me. Sam's Club, we got 20 pounds of chicken, 6 bags of kale salad because they didn't have any coleslaw on the menu,
Sure.
and 2 bags of French fries and a couple of cases of water and a little bin of brownies, and we were and some buns, of course, and
But you
we were
made
good to
it
go.
simple. You made it simple.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is that when we were in the planning process, part of the way that you made this happen, Heather, is that during the planning, we mapped out what was going to need to be done. And then we said, okay, what are the things that only you can do? Is there a way that you can include someone else to do something? And you
Mhm.
determined shopping. If I make the
Mhm.
list, somebody else can do the shopping. So again, it's not dumping a task. It really truly is delegating a task that has great, great,
Mhm.
great, easily definable win. Get these things, but you included
Yeah.
others and it didn't exclusively depend on you. That's huge. Okay, so people, it sounded as if they were thankful. I mean, who doesn't want to not have to cook a meal
Yeah.
for themselves?
I stood there at the front of the buffet line and greeted people as they were going through,
Sure.
and they were like, "Oh, thank you so much for cooking," and, we cracked a few jokes about how I'd slaved in the kitchen all day slicing potatoes, which I didn't. I, opened the bag,
Right.
so
But it's okay. So you had said earlier that that funny question about Oreos kind of primed the pump for connection. I have to tell you, food is a way, because as people are eating, they're having this natural organic dialogue, and the fear
Mhm.
factor or the idea that this is going to become the sage on the stage, leader manically talking, monologue, boring, you're setting the stage for a deeper sense of positive connection all the way around.
Mhm.
Well, I
Mhm.
have to tell you, several big wins for me, Heather. This interview from Cloud Nine, right? You, you number one did the hard work. You said, I want to do this. I don't want to put this off. I don't want to kick the can down the road. And so together, you and I, through the Lead Volunteers material plus some time together through coaching, you mapped out exactly what you were going to do. We really left together. We
Yeah.
left nothing to chance, right?
Right.
It was all mapped out. In addition, you were able to delegate, move things forward. But the funny thing is, the way that you made this meeting, you actually now have the content for the entire school year. So the pressure is
Yeah.
now off, right? I'm just
Right.
so impressed. I'm very impressed with what you've done.
And part of the planning process is I just randomly said, "Okay, October we're having soup, and January we're having a chili cook-off, and we'll do something Christmassy at Christmas." And
So you
so
have
some of things are
even,
planned and some things are not,
but even the
and
food concept, you already have a
yeah,
map. So then you can just kind of fill in the details. That's one of the key things I want every listener to understand. There are so many unknowns. Let's see if we can tie down as many knowns as we can, right?
right.
And then it doesn't make us
Right. And
feel,
then once you get your format, you just plug and play every
that's right.
time.
Rinse and repeat, plug and play.
Mhm.
And so now all you have to do is let's find another fun opening personal connection. Maybe not Oreos this time, right? You've already used that one.
Right, it'll be different.
Yeah. But in the Lead Volunteers material, I think I have like 600. Am I right?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's several pages. There's like, I don't know, 10 pages, so at least 300.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So
There's
that's
lots and
that's
lots.
several years worth of icebreakers.
Yes, but the idea with Lead Volunteers is it is a true done for you curriculum. It's a done for you course that allows you to not have to like shoot from the dark. I mean, it gives you like an
Right.
operating plan. Well, Heather, I am very, very, very encouraged. I'm very impressed with who you are as a person. And by the way, one bonus for everybody out there, hey, guess what, listener? It's worth it. It is worth it for you to have a tied down and fantastic training. Now, I have to throw one more thing out there. Your boss, your
Oh, yeah.
the pastor who oversees you,
You
They
guys
knew this
listen.
was they knew that this was going to be a big deal for you, so they actually attended, which, by the way, could have been somewhat intimidating, though I know you have a good relationship with him. But
Yeah.
at the end of the meeting, you walked into the kitchen and you discovered something special. What was it?
Well, I had recruited some of my volunteers to help clean up at the end of
Sure.
the night, and so half a dozen of us walk into the kitchen, and all the dishes are all done. Everything's done.
How cool is that? And
Everything.
so
Everything's
your
wiped down. Everything's done.
So how cool is that? Because in a sense, what you discovered is part of the Cloud 9 is that you really, really, really did a great job and did your part. Your boss saw your hard work. He saw the fruit that was happening in the meeting, and he took it upon himself to bless you and to do all the dishes and clean up. I mean, what a great
Yeah,
night,
that
right?
was huge.
That was huge. Well, Heather, I'm very, very, very excited. Thank you for taking time with us today. Um,
Absolutely. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. Beyond that, like it's not that hard. Now that you have a plan, like it's
Yeah,
not
I
that
would say
difficult.
even, for people that feel like I can't cook for 30 people or I can barely cook for my family or
Sure.
whatever, you can do this. You can do this.
Yes.
It's not that hard. You can do dessert. You could just get some bagels, just
Yes.
something, and add a tablecloth and some Bible verses, and people are going to appreciate it. They will feel encouraged. They will feel loved, and they will affirm you in your
That's right.
efforts
That's
for
right.
sure.
And so this doesn't have to be a 5-star meal. Give me a break. This needs
Yeah,
to be a 5-star place for connection, right? And Heather, you've done that. I'm
right.
very,
That's
very,
the
very grateful.
point.
Very grateful.
That's
Well,
the point. Yeah.
gang, thank you guys so much. Hey, I want to do a quick shout out. If you don't already have the Lead Volunteers Ministry Insights book, this is 52 different chapters that are bite sized. They have some reflection questions. This would be an easy way for you to have a wealth of content for you to have during your staff meetings, right? If you're like, what in the world would I say? I want to encourage you to check out the Ministry Insights book. It is actually free on the Lead Volunteers website. You just have to pay for shipping. Well, gang, this has been the Lead Volunteers podcast and Lead Ministry Live. I'm so, so, so grateful today for my friend Heather, who has joined us. You too, listener, can be successful when it comes to leading meetings. Well, thank you guys so much. Again, this is the Lead Volunteers podcast, Lead Ministry Live. We'll catch you next time.